It's the Real Estate Podcast, brought to you by ANZ Home Loans for financial well-beings.
Hey, it's your Real Estate Breakfast back for the weekend. Yes, breaking down for you the Aussie property market. Got another busy Saturday morning property show coming up. And are you going for it this weekend with real estate options across Australia? You know, you've seen a property, you like it, you love it maybe, and you're going back for a second or third visit. Now, I generally know straight away when I see a property whether or not I'm going to buy it. And because I'm a solo, yes, without needing the permission for sign-off from the other half, my decisions are much faster and generally much different to somebody that's got a partner. But I do feel for people who love something. You know, they fall in love with it. And either the hubby or the wife says, no, I'm just not convinced. You know, we've heard that before, haven't we, if we're married? Sometimes that ends in divorce, believe it or not. Gee, that escalated very fast. But if you are in that situation and maybe you've had the knockback, let us know. We'd love to know your story. If you're a new listener too, welcome to the podcast. A lot of catching up to do if you are a new listener. We have over 1,500 real estate property podcasts on the Australian property market, so there's lots to keep you engaged. It is a Saturday morning, as mentioned. Can you believe it? Today is the last day of February. Let's go to Melbourne and catch up with Kevin Chokshi from Ray White. And good morning to you, Kevin. Welcome on to the Real Estate Breakfast. Yeah, is that something that you can relate to? Because you mentioned to me off air that you're a married guy, so there's two people making a decision when buying your property.
Truthfully speaking, there's only one person making a decision, and that's my wife.
True. But you will see this all the time, right? Where you think, I've got a sale here, this is a done deal, and only to learn later that either the husband or the wife is saying, I love it, but, you know, my spouse hates it.
It happened last week at a property. The husband loved it. His family loved it. He brought his parents as well. The wife wasn't sure. They came to the auction. Fortunately for them, it ended up passing in, and they did place an offer after, but she decided she doesn't want the property and they ended up pulling out of it. So yes, it does happen. But I think when you do this long enough, you sort of understand that, you know, both partners have to agree, especially the female. I think generally I find if they're a married couple, the females are typically the key decision makers in that instance as far as properties are concerned.
So if you want to be the key decision maker, don't get married is what Kevin is saying. And just from a timing perspective, because this would take longer. I mean, it's something that I haven't really talked about on the podcast before. From a real estate agent's point of view, if you're dealing with somebody solo like me that looks at the property once and says, Kevin, draw up the paperwork, versus two decision makers, so it will be drawn out.
Absolutely. Well, two decision makers normally leads to more decision makers, because when there's a husband and a wife or a couple involved, sometimes they might want their family to come and have a look as well. There's more opinions because there's more people. And it's generally when they're buying as a couple, in a lot of cases, if they have kids, it's a lot long-term permanent decision as well. So that can slow down the process a fair bit.
Maybe when you get in touch with a real estate agent, say, just letting you know we're married, we're a married couple, might take a little longer. All right. Now, entry-level house prices nationally, as we know, have surged 68% in 5 years from Domain. We've talked about the wage growth is less than a third of that pace. Melbourne is one of the few relatively bright spots across the country. Growth has been more moderate, meaning deposit timelines are shorter than Brisbane and Sydney, and that's also attracting interstate buyers and even international buyers seeking that lifestyle, the value and the comparative affordability. So how much of that are you seeing when comparing to a Sydney, comparing to a Brisbane?
It's been an interesting market to watch, Craig. Obviously, affordability is still tougher than what it was years ago, but Melbourne still remains one of those most accessible major capitals that has a great lifestyle availability as well as, great properties that are on offer. The median house price, we sit in the high 900s, which is dramatically lower than Sydney, where buyers are facing 1.5 million plus. And yet I still remember maybe 7 or 8 years ago, there was a conversation that by 2031, Melbourne will surpass Sydney. That hasn't happened. In fact, it's gone the other way. And more importantly, almost half of Melbourne's sales last year occurred under 750,000. That's a very well-functioning entry market, which is critical for first-home buyers, especially if they're willing to consider units, townhouses, or look at some growth corridors. Melbourne still offers some really good, realistic entry points.
Talking of those first-home buyers, there is this underlying growth that is still there in Melbourne, which I think some people kind of overlook when you're comparing to other markets like Sydney.
Absolutely. Melbourne hasn't seen the explosive spikes that some other cities have experienced, which ironically helps first-home buyers right now. It's relatively price stable. With selective growth, there's parts of Melbourne that have grown really well, particularly in some of the affordable suburbs and also the unit market. But the stability creates an opportunity, in my opinion, because buyers aren't chasing runaway prices. They're negotiating in a more balanced environment. But also, just like night follows day, I've seen this in my career in real estate, where eventually everything grows. There's people coming in, infrastructure, immigration. So at some point, the market will go up and will catch up with everyone else. Otherwise, it defies logic. So I think now would be an incredible time for a first-time buyer to get into Melbourne.
Yeah. And how long have you been in the real estate game?
About 14 years.
You would have seen so much going on in those 14 years. We are talking to Kevin on the Saturday Morning Property Show. When we come back, we're actually going to ask Kevin a little about the auction market in Melbourne. He is an auctioneer, so he's going to give us some insights, and we'll do that after this.
From interest rates rising, a shifting landscape, rentals running hot, clearance rates, a tight rental market, buyer-vendor sentiment. We cover it all every morning from 6 a.m. on the Real Estate Breakfast.
And it is a Real Estate Saturday right around Australia. Weekend of buying, as I mentioned. Is it the second, third, fourth time? I think anybody that's going back for a fourth time, don't buy it. It's not screaming at you, buy me. 4 times, even 3 times, I think, is probably too many times. Kevin is with us. He is in Melbourne. He's also an auctioneer. And I just want to ask you about some of the hesitation that you are seeing in the Melbourne auction market at the moment.
There's certainly a level of hesitation I see, especially with first-time buyers, things like the media, sometimes the auction clearance rates, those sort of things don't help. There's also, sometimes I think buyers get caught out because they'll attend an auction, they might have seen 5 or 10 open homes before bidding. They're not pre-approved, or their pre-approval may have expired and they haven't renewed it, and then they miss out on the right property. And that's a key part. I think buyers definitely need to put a lot more preparation. I see sometimes people spend a lot more time preparing for a holiday or a honeymoon, so to speak, than they do before buying a property.
And I always ask an auctioneer this because every auctioneer has a funny story or an odd story or something just weird that they were not expecting. So come on, tell us, Kevin, what has been a weird moment that you were faced with at an auction?
I've got a plethora of funny moments, but a memorable one was I was in the middle of an auction. There was close to 100 people in the crowd. It was a pretty special property. I start doing the auction. As I'm going through my spiel, I get swooped by a magpie. But this magpie, I'm in the middle of a bidding sequence, and this magpie goes straight for my head. And I was quite proud because this whole thing was filmed, and my reflexes were unbelievable because I just ducked down, missed the magpie, and then continued on with the auction as if nothing had happened. So it was quite hilarious to watch back on camera.
Oh, so you did a little bit of a Bruce Lee sort of move.
Very much so.
We've got to put that in the show notes, don't we, so that people can see it. You said that it's captured on video.
It's actually on my Instagram, so people can see it. It's quite funny.
All right, well, we will add a link in so that you can see the Bruce Lee move from Kevin this morning, getting rid of that magpie, yeah. Now, I just want to come back to how people sometimes, when it comes to auctions, they can be very casual. Never ceases to amaze me this, where people aren't completely switched on. They don't have, in some cases, their maximum price. They just haven't worked out the strategy. And auctions, if I know one thing, is all about strategy.
Absolutely agree. The experienced ones or the people that are well researched will normally speak to the agent a couple of times. They'll get a really deep understanding of how the process is going. I've currently got a client who's about to buy his third property, and he's visited the property a couple of times to see if there's anyone else interested. He's been asking the agent questions if someone else has had a building inspection done. Would the owner be open to a smaller deposit? Because sometimes that's a good sign if there is a lot of interest or not. They've asked me about bidding strategy, where they should stand, how they should bid, when should they stop, what if it passes in. They are going in absolutely prepared, ready to buy. Other instances, I'll see people that have never bid at an auction and they haven't researched, and they get super nervous on the day. They don't necessarily know all the information they need to know. And I think that's for planning when it comes to a pretty important life decision.
And the other thing too, when it comes to first home buyers, most, I would say, don't realise that they can buy a property. Okay, it's going to auction, but they can buy that property before it goes to auction. There seems to be, can't do anything, just got to turn up at the auction scenario in their mind.
Absolutely. Until the day of an auction, it's a private sale in most cases, which means if there's a buyer who really likes the property, it always helps asking the question if the owner would consider an offer prior, and if so, where would the offer need to be for them to buy it. The next part, if you're ever entering that process in that sort of a scenario, to always find out is how that agent runs the pre-offer process. And what I mean by that is every agent might run it differently. For example, if the asking price is 1 to 1.1 million and the buyer says, I'm happy to offer $1,050,000 prior to auction, and the agent might say, yeah, sure, that's going to be acceptable. You really want to understand the next step. And what the next step might look like is the agent's still got a job to do, which is to let everyone else know that we are cancelling a publicly advertised auction, which means if someone else decides to place a higher offer, what's the agent going to do? Are they going to disclose the offer to you? Is it going to turn into a silent auction? So are you going to get a second opportunity to increase your offer? Or is the agent going to go, well, you had your chance, you offered $1,050,000 and someone else has offered 1.1, so sorry, you miss out. Because in that case, you would have been better off going to auction and not placing that offer prior. So really asking those key questions and understanding how each agent runs the process. If there was an offer or if there were multiple offers, what's going to happen next? And that's I think that's going to be very useful.
Yeah, some great tips there from Kevin this morning in Melbourne. And that is where we're going to round things off. Kevin, thanks for coming on to the Real Estate Breakfast this morning. Get out there and be busy with your auctions this weekend, and talk again another time.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Stay ahead of the competition with the latest news, insights and data analysis on the Property Podcast that keeps you informed.
49% of young couples' incomes across the capitals are being spent. Units aren't much better with 30%.
The rule of thumb used to be around about 30%. That's where units are sitting now. But again, units are just about out of the market for a lot of home buyers now, with the median unit price in Sydney, for example, around about $900,000. It's tough stuff out there trying to get onto the property market.
How much of an uplift in first home buyer activity are you seeing there firsthand in Sydney?
A lot. First home buyer activity is at its highest level since March 2022. It's increased to close to 7% in the September to December quarter of 2025. The other thing we're seeing is demand in those areas underneath those property price caps is absolutely surging. We've seen growth in the lower quartile suburbs, if you like, of 11% compared to in the upper quartile suburbs of 6.7%.
We connect you to the best real estate information across Australia. The Real Estate Podcast.